right there.
All right, guys, I get questions about, how do you survive Ranger School, and are there any tips to survive Ranger School? So, okay, so that's an idea for a video. So this week we're going to talk about how to survive Ranger School. And full disclosure, I went to Ranger School pretty well 100 years ago. I'm not exaggerating. Here's my old Ranger School picture. Taken down at Fort Benning, Georgia. My mom flew in to pin my Ranger tab onto my shoulder. And yeah, I'm the guy way out at the end. Funny stuff indeed. My background, you guys know I was in the Army. I did 25 years in the Army. I actually went to Ranger School while I was in my recon platoon for the 101st Airborne. To be in the recon platoon, all the sergeants had to be Ranger qualified. So when I was a corporal, they then sent me to Ranger School. I graduated Ranger School and basically went right off to Desert Storm. Right after Desert Storm, I went Special Forces where nobody cared about it anymore. So then all the rest of my career was as a Green Beret, Special Forces for the U.S. Army. I was in a special mission unit. I was the master sniper for my unit. Later on, I went on to be a A-team sergeant as a master sergeant, and then I retired as a company sergeant major for the special mission unit for 5th Special Forces Group. Notice that didn't list Ranger at all because I am not a Ranger. All right, what I mean by that is there is a difference between going to Ranger School and being in a Ranger regiment, right? There are the Ranger regiment, Delta calls them the baby Huas. You've got 4 battalions of Rangers, and they are the top of the line infantry units. Rangers are awesome. Rangers are awesome. I was never in a Ranger battalion. I was never in the Ranger regiment at all. All right, so you'll hear the Rangers say, well, he has a tab, not a scroll. The Ranger Regiment, they have a scroll. It'll say 1st Ranger Battalion, 2nd Ranger Battalion, so forth. Those are what I consider real Rangers, right? Now, we're talking about Ranger School. Now, Ranger School back in the day, before they had a Ranger Regiment, you go all the way back to Vietnam, Ranger School was an awesome school to get, you'd go to Ranger School before you went to Vietnam, you'd be doing jungle lanes and they had a little SEER portion in it. It was a insanely tough school. Fast forward, Ranger School was taken over by TRADOC, which is basically Department of Army's branch of schools, the schoolhouse, what we called, and they design all military schools to be passed. So basically what Ranger School is a leadership school. It's teaching you how to be a leadership be a leader in the Army. And they use small unit tactics as a means for you to learn how to lead people. You start off with patrol-based activities and doing reconnaissances and then raids and ambushes. And through the whole time, you're in different leadership positions, from squad leaders to patrol leader and platoon sergeant, and you rotate these positions, you're graded, and it's a way for you to learn to lead troops on the modern battlefield, because in Ranger School, you're not a happy camper. You're not. Minimal amount of food, minimal amount of sleep, sometimes 2 hours of sleep a day, sometimes less. Depending on when you go to Ranger School, 1 meal a day. Right? And so you got guys that are hungry, tired, pissed off, getting rained on, they're freezing their ass off. They're not easy to lead to do what you want them to do, and you learn how to lead them. So that's the first thing you've got to click is, if you see a young officer or a sergeant or even a general with a Ranger tab, it's a black tab with gold edge on it. They have been through Ranger School, and it is a good school for teaching leadership. Primarily, like all your infantry officers should have to go through Ranger School. To me, I think that should be mandatory, and most of them do go. Not all of them, unfortunately. And we won't even get into everybody else that they're letting go through Ranger School. But again, understand TRADOC has taken over Ranger School, and it is what it is, right? But first and foremost, understand that it is a leadership school for Department of the Army. It is not part of Ranger Regiment. I am not a Ranger. I'm not. I'm someone that graduated Ranger School. It was actually back winter of 1989. That's how old I am. I'm dating myself here. Understand schools ebb and flow, and they change things, but Ranger School will always be Ranger School, right? So in order for me to teach you how to survive Ranger School, I got to let you guys know what really is Ranger School. Let's go step by step through the whole course. But before we do that, let's break for a commercial real quick. All right, welcome back. Winter 89, we start at Fort Benning, Georgia. That's where you do your initial in-processing. This is also where you meet what is called an RI, or a Ranger Instructor. These are the roughest, toughest guys. They've got the high and tight haircuts, little hamburger patty on the top of their head. Their hats all rolled down. And these guys are just barrel-chested freedom fighters. They are angry, they are pissed off all the time, and they want you to quit. Serious as a heart attack. Because to them, not everybody should get a Ranger tab. Not all officers should get to go to Ranger School. This kid's from the 101st. He should not be here at Ranger School. You should not be here at Ranger School. I want you to quit. Matter of fact, I'm going to make you quit. That is the attitude that they present. And here's why. Because they're trying to get you into that mindset. And understand that the school is designed for you to pass, right? The Ranger instructors, their job is to, by definition, to instruct, right? But they also have to uphold that standard, right? But they're also there to keep you safe. But they ain't going to let you know that. They're not going to let you know that their job is to keep you from dying, right? And literally, if you've got that mentality that, these guys, it's okay for you to die, right? If you go in with that mentality, honest, you find life's a lot easier. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of people that go to military schools and, well, excuse me, Sergeant, I don't like being talked to in a tone like that. That's when you get punched in the throat. You understand? You can't do that to you in basic training. They'll do it to you in Ranger School, all right? You don't like only getting a couple minutes of sleep. You don't like getting woke up by people kicking you in the bottom of your boots and them throwing trash cans in the middle of the barracks or whatever. I understand that's Ranger School. It just is. So initial in-processing, like every other school, you've got to do the Army physical fitness test, right? Push-ups, sit-ups, run. They've got all the new stuff that the Army does now, pull-ups, and but the Ranger instructors are there to hold you to a higher standard. All right, it's going to be one of the toughest PT tests you ever do. And you only got to get the bare minimum. That's it. You don't have to max there's no need to impress them. But first and foremost, if you're getting ready to go to Ranger School, I would recommend you get to where you can completely max out perfect score on the Army physical fitness test. Because when you go to Ranger School, they are going to hold you to such a tight standard. Nope, that rep wasn't good enough. Nope, that one doesn't count. That one doesn't count. That one counts. Nope, that one doesn't count. That you might have to do 90, 100, 120 push-ups just to get 65 that count, because you needed 65 to pass, whatever it might be. Right? And then you've got the swim test. You've got to be able to swim 50 meters uniform in boots while holding your rubber M16 out of the water. Not hard, but you'd be surprised how many guys end up failing stuff like that. We'll have you lay out all your gear, what you're allowed to have, what you're not allowed to have. Make sure that you brought all the equipment that you're supposed to have. You'll get issued other gear from them there at the schoolhouse. And you'll be assigned different companies: Alpha Company, Bravo Company, Charlie Company. Right off the bat, I got assigned to Charlie Company. I remember Bravo Company, for example, right there, that first phase at Benning, they weren't called Bravo Company. They were called Beano Company, like Beano Company. And you literally, Beano, there will be no hair. There will be no chow. There will be no Ranger School. You will not pass and get this tab. You won't. They were called Beano Company. And you'd see them. We're going into the chow hall to go eat. And we've got short hair on top, shaved on the sides. Everybody from Beano Company, their heads were shaved bald. We're in the chow hall with a fork and knife eating steak and potatoes. Beano Company, all they were allowed to get was the big spoon. I mean, the big spoon. We call it the soup ladle. And that's what they had. They weren't even allowed to sit down at a table. They had to get their tray with their steak, their potatoes, their drinks and everything. And then they had to immediately walk to the KP spot where they turn the trays in and walk straight there. And you had to eat everything with your spoon before you got there. And that was the mentality that Beano Company had. There will be no Ranger tab. You're not going to graduate. You understand, the 80 people in this company, you guys aren't graduating. You're not going to get your tab, Lieutenant. I don't care if you're fresh from West Point. You're not getting a tab. That was Beano Company. But again, understand that it's the Ranger instructors they're just trying to get in your head. They're trying to break you down. That's it. So look at it as though these guys can kill me, but they can't eat me. I am a prisoner. And, these RIs are the prison guards. And so long as I don't get shanked in the shower, I'll make it through my term and I'll eventually be released on parole. They would do things like you had the 3 mile run or whatever run it was. You'd have to run in formation and you had to be able to reach. If the RI told you to reach out your hand and touch the guy in front of you, if you couldn't touch the guy in front of you, if you were just 4 inches too far away, he would pull you out of line. You were a fallout. You just failed the run. Pack your shit, Ranger, you're out of here. There was an officer in my groups, the guy behind him, remember, because you're trying to run too close together, he actually stepped on the back of the guy's shoe, his sneaker. The officer's sneaker came off. He finished the run. Now, the RIs, Ranger instructors, they gave him a minor plus for losing his shoe, but then they gave him a major minus. They gave him a minor plus spot report for staying in the run with only one shoe. And then they gave him a major minus spot report for losing his shoe. Right? That's crazy, right? So what is a spot report? That's something else we'll mess with. I'll tell you all about that after our next commercial. So spot reports, what that is if the Ranger instructor sees you doing something good or bad, he would whip out this card and have you sign it. And basically if you did something good, they would give you a minor positive spot report. Now it took three minors to make a major, and they never gave out a major positive spot report. But if you did something good, like saving a dying baby from a burning building, they would give you a minor positive spot report. It would take 3 of those to cancel out a major minus. That's all I ever saw in my whole life were major minuses. And but if you did something like fell asleep on a machine gun, yeah, I got one for that. They would, pulling security on the machine gun, I woke up and stuck on the front sight of the M60 machine gun was a major minus spot report for falling asleep while pulling security. These guys would just pass them out all the time. The total crazy stuff. I mentioned I went through in the winter and you're freezing your butt off. They never gave you any winter clothes or anything. Instead, to warm you up, they would give you exercise. Let's get that core temperature up. Road marches, runs, this, that, and the other, jumping jacks, calisthenics. We got up one morning, and one thing you've got to do initial in processing is they have this thing called the worm pit. The worm pit is basically 18 inches deep just the nastiest, muddy slop water. It's just nasty. And there's all this barbed wire and poles you got to go under. There's ropes and monkey bars and all this stuff. And it's just nasty. And nobody looks forward to doing the worm pit because it's just covered with mosquitoes and everything, but it's wintertime. We're dreading it because we're already cold, but they pull us out of the barracks and we know it's the morning we're supposed to do the worm pit. And the guy next to me elbows me and he's like, look at the puddle, look at the puddle. There's ice on the puddle. And he's smiling. He's like, it's gonna be awesome. We don't gotta do the worm pit. If it's frozen, we don't have to do the worm pit. So sure enough, uniform and boots, they take us off jogging. And they're calling cadence. We go the mile or so it is around the block to get to the worm pit. And we're looking at this thing, and this thing is completely covered with ice. Well, they have the first two ranks. Interlace your fingers behind your head, and they put these guys online. And sure enough, they had them all do the high stepper and break up all the ice on the worm pit. And then sure enough, they have us low crawl through the worm pit. And there's no way you would do that to human beings. You understand, if a congressman or there was a general standing there, there's no way the instructors would do that. They just wouldn't be allowed to do that. But it's Ranger School. So you don't get your high hopes up that, oh, well, they can't do that to us because that's inhumane. You're not in prison. You don't have any rights. You're not going to survive this. Just accept the fact that you're going to do it. You don't have any rights, and you'll get through it. You just do. Just accept the fact that it's going to suck. And so long as you do that and you have that mentality, they can kill me, but they can't eat me. You'll be fine. Honestly, you'll eventually make it through. We made it through Fort Benning. And from there, we went off to Mountain Phase. Let's head up to Dahlonega, Georgia. Get up to Dahlonega, Georgia, you start getting into Mountain Phase, and you got the Derby Queen, which is like the mother of all obstacle courses up there. You got to go through this thing, and it's kilometers long. You're paired up with a ranger buddy. Now, my ranger buddy at Dahlonega, I'm already on my second ranger buddy because I lost my first one in the hand-to-hand pit at Benning. Second ranger buddy, he was a West Pointer, but I remember he was a real little itty-bitty guy. And we're trying to do some of these different obstacles, and there was one he couldn't do. I quickly did it. He couldn't jump far enough to grab the next log. He'd fall, so I'd have to go back and do it with him. So now I had to do this one obstacle like 5 times. I mean, you could feel and you could hear my heart just dropping to the ground and crushing. Every time he fell off the obstacle, my heart would drop because I know I'd have to do the obstacle again. Well, after a while, the RIs, there's 3 RIs yelling at him. There's only 1 RI yelling at me. And he just said, Ranger, you go to the next obstacle, you find another Ranger buddy. And you run to the next obstacle. Of course, there's a RI before the next obstacle who's now going to yell at me and make me do push-ups because I don't have my Ranger buddy with me. And then another Ranger student would show up, somebody different. He'd get paired up with me. So anyways, you make it through the Derby Queen. I will tell you, I like obstacle courses. The Derby Queen, hands down, the best obstacle course I've ever done in my life. Kilometers long. It is a blast. I wish I could do it again, but not as a Ranger School student. You get to do a lot of great things at Mountain Phase. You're gonna do the rope test, and you'll learn about rappelling and mountaineering, rock climbing. But at the end, you end up getting into patrolling again, where different leadership positions, and these things are all pass or fail. Doing patrolling, remember those raids and ambushes and stuff, doing them in the mountains is different than doing them in different parts of the world. So you actually start to modify those things. I had snow come in the winter, but for the most part, Mountain Phase, I learned a lot in Mountain Phase. You learn how bad it sucks to be cold, but it wasn't a bad phase. It really wasn't at all. From there, we went on to Florida Phase. Florida Phase sucks. Before we do Florida Phase, let's do another commercial. All right, so Florida phase. Florida phase sounds like it'd be better than mountain phase in the winters, right? I mentioned snow. The problem though is the ranger instructors up in the mountains are used to ranger students getting cold, all right? Ranger instructors in Florida are just used to ranger students telling you they're cold because they've lost 20 pounds already, right? They're cold because they're wet. But for the most part, it's Florida. It's the Florida Panhandle. You're at Eglin Air Force Base. You're in the swamps. It's the Yellow River. You're really not getting that cold, except it was the winter of '89 when all the orange groves froze. Yeah, I was chest deep in the Yellow River. So Florida phase is a fun phase. It's swamp phase or jungle phase. You do boat ops there with the Zodiac boats. But again, you're learning patrolling, but in a jungle environment. And different leadership positions and stuff. It was rough. We had, it was a couple classes before some ranger students died in Florida. So the RI instructors were still a little cavalier. We actually had 64 cold weather injuries in a single hour. Instead of bringing these students, the hypothermia patients out of the swamp by boat, they actually decided to bring the PA and the SF medics into the swamp. We ended up stacking them all like cordwood and everything. I got the end of Florida phase. I caught frostbite on 4 toes, believe it or not. And it's actually a tragic but funny story. I shared it with my patrons on Patreon. I really don't want to relive it right now. I'm going to have post-traumatic stress and all, so I'm going to skip it. But one thing I will say, I recycled Florida phase. So let's say you recycle. All right. Whether it was you failed the leadership position or you were medical injury, instead of them kicking you completely out of ranger school, sometimes they will say, all right, we're going to leave you right here. You just got to redo this one phase. All right. Okay, cool. So each phase is so many weeks long. So you would wait for the next class to show up and then you would jump back in with them. Now, they're a couple weeks behind you. So in general, you would be looking at 1 or 2 weeks of sitting in what we call the gulag. You're basically a prisoner of war there for the ranger instructors waiting for the next class to show up. So in Florida phase, that meant you going out and with machetes and clearing new helicopter landing zones and everything. But one thing I will say about the ranger instructors while you were in the gulag was they want you to pass. So while you were in the gulag, you were eating 3 meals a day in the chow hall. You could go to church on Sundays. You could learn, they were giving you more classes so you could learn the leadership positions better. Now for me, instead of just being in the gulag 2 weeks, because there was no class behind me, it was the winter, so the whole Christmas break. So I ended up being in the gulag for like 45 days. I put on like 30 pounds, eating 3 meals a day. And I learned a lot in the gulag. I probably learned more about leadership and more of what there was to learn in ranger school while I was in the gulag. I did not like having frostbite on 4 toes. It still haunts me to this day. If the temperature drops below 50 degrees, I lose circulation in my feet. But anyways, the next group finally showed up. We were all these 60 cold weather injuries. We were plugged back in, and I got to do Florida phase all over again. Capsize drills with the Zodiac rafts and the hit on Santa Rosa Island again. All this stuff, we got to do it all again. And it was a good time. It was a good time. From there, back on the planes, and from there, they flew us to desert phase. Before I get to desert phase, though, let's do one more commercial. Desert phase now, I'm pretty sure, is in Texas. Desert phase for me was actually at Dugway, Utah, which is a place where they used to test chemical weapons. Yeah, you had Wig Mountain, and it involved a lot of live fire ranges. So a lot of your ranger students, you kind of ask them, did you go to Dugway, Utah? Did you go to Texas? Who knows where it is now? Again, more patrolling, because doing patrols, raids, ambushes, reconnaissance, patrol-based activities, all that stuff is different in Florida phase than in the mountains than in the desert. So you start learning all these different things, but by now you're actually getting good at as a platoon. You really, really are. You start learning the leadership positions better, and you start getting better at this stuff. You really do. And yeah, I'll tell you, mountain phase was actually a good phase for me. I had a good time there. We had a lot of live fire hits. Some of my funnest ones were wearing gas masks up behind a machine gun on Wig Mountain while all the guys, all the students were maneuvering underneath, and how nobody got shot the whole time. They never had anybody get shot. Crazy. Don't know how, when you got guys falling asleep on the machine guns because they've had 2 hours of sleep in 48 hours. But we got through it somehow. From there, you go back to Fort Benning, Georgia for your glorious graduation. How do you graduate Ranger School? One, a lot of luck. It's really not luck. It is attitude. It is attitude. If you go into Ranger School, be in good shape, of course, but understand, if you go into Ranger School with a good attitude, it doesn't matter that you know the patrolling ahead of time or you know the leadership principles ahead of time. You understand, you're going to get your Ranger handbook, and it has all the leadership and your 5-paragraph op orders and all the checklists. You're going to learn. They're going to give that to you. They're going to teach you all of it step by step. You'll have plenty of time to learn it all. You don't have to practice that. Be in shape before you go. All right, if you want to put on a little extra weight so you got a little more weight to lose, understand you will be hungry. You will be tired without a doubt. But the key to Ranger School is understanding your worth. And if you go in there with, well, I'm a lieutenant, you can't treat me that way because I'm an officer, you're not going to make it. If you go in there, well, I'm a Green Beret, my Special Forces tab is worth more than your Ranger tab. You can't talk to me that way. You're not going to graduate. You're not. You need to go in there with the attitude that you actually understand the ladder of life. And what I mean by that is you've got mammals, all right? And then you've got, all the insects that crawl on the ground. You got all that dirt that the insects walk on, right? You got worms inside. Remember I mentioned the worm pit? You got worms that crawl through that mud, right? You're not a worm, because you understand a Ranger instructor probably wouldn't step on that worm. But if you look at it as though your life is worth about what those coffee grounds that the worms are crawling through, if you accept that for the next 50, 80 days, while you're a Ranger student, that's what your life is worth, and you focus on, you can yell at me, you can kick me, you can tell me how bad a person I am. I'm going to help out my Ranger buddy. My Ranger buddy's going to help me out, and together we're going to live. And if you just focus, all you got to do is live. Just stay alive. But you go in there with that mentality that you're basically worth worm dirt. You go in there with the correct mentality, you're going to learn everything. You're going to learn it. They'll make you recite the Ranger Creed every day, twice a day. And I told myself I was never going to learn it. I'd say it, I'd move my lips, but I was going to make it through the whole course without learning the Ranger Creed. I'm here to tell you, 5 calendar months in Ranger School. By the end of it, I knew the Ranger Creed. I knew it. I understood it. But more importantly was it meant something to me, because you're going to learn all this stuff. You're going to learn all the leadership principles. You're going to learn how to lead guys when they're cold and tired and they don't want to do anything. When they don't want to do nothing. They don't want to do nothing. And sometimes it's threats of bodily harm. Sometimes it's you grabbing them and shaking them and making them do it. But you'll learn how to lead other people. And Yeah, it's a good time. Anyways, that's how you survive Ranger School. It's all mental, guys. It's all mental. And again, I'm not a Ranger. I graduated Ranger School. I have the tab on my uniform right underneath my Special Forces tab. I was a Green Beret, guys. But Ranger School, is it slightly different today? Do they add things here and there? Yeah, I hear they got to wear body armor and helmets now. I didn't have to wear that when I went through. Right? But it's still a great school. You guys know the deal. Leave your comments below. Share with me your Ranger School stories if you've already been through Ranger School. I'd love to hear them, and hopefully I give some of you Ranger graduates post-traumatic stress like I've just gone through right here, right now, thinking about how bad that school actually was. Leave the comments below. Y'all take care and shoot straight. If you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter so you don't miss out on anything.